It started with a medical necessity, a bone marrow transplant that could save Thomas Forrester's life. When Finn proposed an extended HLA typing panel to expand the potential donor pool, no one expected anything more than routine analysis. Thomas had collapsed during a fitting at Forrester Creations. He had been hiding symptoms for weeks: fatigue, fevers, night sweats. The diagnosis came swiftly: aggressive but treatable leukemia. The Forrester family rallied around him, determined to find a donor fast. Ridge, of course, stepped forward first. As Thomas's father, his match potential was high. But when Finn reviewed the compatibility markers, something didn't line up. The mismatch wasn't subtle. It was glaring. Genetically, Ridge should have shared at least a 50% match with his son. Instead, it was far less. Too little to make sense. Finn double-checked the results, then triple-checked. Still no match. He ran a second test. Same outcome. Ridge was not a viable donor, and more importantly, the data suggested something more alarming. Ridge didn't appear to be Thomas's biological father at all. Finn didn't want to jump to conclusions. He went into the system and pulled older blood work from past medical records. He tracked years of stored data, routine hospital visits, minor injuries, blood drives. What he found wasn't a single fluke. The genetic discrepancy had been consistent across Thomas's entire medical history. For years, no one had noticed because no one had reason to look. Until now, the realization hit like a freight train. Finn didn't know how to approach it. He didn't want to set fire to the Forrester family without proof. But this wasn't just a family issue, it was a life-or-death matter. Thomas's chances at recovery depended on a donor. And if Ridge wasn't the father, they were looking in the wrong genetic pool entirely. So Finn went to the one person who deserved to know first: Taylor. When Finn told her the results, Taylor didn't speak for almost a full minute. She just stared at him. Her expression was blank to blank. Then the color drained from her face, and she sat down without a word. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Ridge is Thomas's father. He's always been," but her voice betrayed her. There was a tremor in it, a subtle crack in the foundation of certainty. Finn explained the findings again. The test was conclusive. The genome analysis was clear. There was no paternity match between Ridge and Thomas. Taylor's silence became suffocating. She finally looked up and said one name: Eric. Finn froze. Eric Forrester, Ridge's father, Thomas's grandfather, the patriarch. It wasn't just unexpected, it was inconceivable. But Taylor's mind had already begun to race through old memories. A night decades ago. One night. She had told herself it meant nothing, that it hadn't happened, that Ridge was the father. But now everything was unraveling. Finn encouraged a controlled retest, one with full transparency. But Ridge, when informed, refused to accept the possibility. He demanded that the tests be redone in a neutral hospital, away from Forrester influence, Spencer ties, or anyone connected to Finn. He accused Finn of bias, of planting doubt. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. That his son was suddenly being questioned after decades of being raised as a Forrester, carrying the name, the legacy, the burden, and the glory of it all. The test was redone. Triple-blind, third-party lab, full legal oversight. And when the results came in, they confirmed what no one was ready to face. Ridge Forrester is not the biological father of Thomas. The ripple effect was instant and catastrophic. Eric, blindsided by the revelation, initially denied everything. Taylor would never lie like this, he insisted. This has to be a mistake. Someone's tampering with results. But deep down, a flicker of doubt sparked. A memory. A conversation. An unspoken connection with Taylor that had always hovered at the edge of propriety. Eric demanded a test of his own. And when the lab results came back, they were irrefutable. Eric Forrester is Thomas's biological father. Everything stopped. Ridge stormed out of the lab, past reporters, staff, and family. He didn't say a word. Not to Brooke. Not to Taylor. not to Thomas. He disappeared for days, unreachable. The Forrester mansion became a war zone of whispers and confrontation. Taylor tried to reach out to him, to explain, to apologize, but Ridge wasn't ready to hear any of it. To him, this was a betrayal unlike any other. His own father, the woman he once loved, and the son he had raised as his own. He felt like a stranger in his own life. Thomas, still recovering from his first round of chemo, took the news in silence. At first, then came the questions. If Ridge wasn't his father, then who was he really? What did the name Forrester even mean now? Was he still an heir, or just an accident that everyone had pretended into existence? Steffi was livid. Why now? She demanded. Why now does all this have to come out? When Thomas is fighting for his life, she turned on Taylor. How could you lie to us for so long? But even in her fury, Steffi wasn't just angry, was scared. Because if their family wasn't built on truth, then what was left? Brooke, ever present, ever poised, took the opportunity to support Ridge. I warned you, she said, not with cruelty, but with conviction. Taylor's past has always been full of secrets. And now you know what those secrets cost. But it wasn't about sides anymore. It was about survival, identity, legacy. Ridge returned eventually, but he was different, colder, more distant. He avoided Thomas, spoke only in clipped sentences. When Eric tried to speak to him, Ridge responded with one sentence. You raised me to be better than this. You failed. For Thomas, the emotional toll became unbearable. His treatment faltered. He began skipping sessions, refusing meals, closing in on himself. The illness was one battle, but the identity crisis was worse. Everyone kept telling him what mattered was who raised him, not who fathered him. But those words felt hollow. He had been living a lie his entire life. And no one, not his mother, not Ridge, not Erisha, told him the truth. Finn stayed close. Despite the backlash, the tension, the blame, he refused to walk away. You have a right to be angry, he told Thomas. But you also have a right to live. And you won't survive this if you keep drowning in questions no one can answer. Eventually, Thomas allowed the transplant list to be expanded using Eric's profile. And ironically, Eric proved to be a partial match. Enough to move forward. The bone marrow transfer was scheduled. Eric offered without hesitation. Let me do one thing right, he said. Let me save you. But healing wasn't just about blood types. The Forrester family, once united by design and legacy, now stood divided by biology and betrayal. What Ridge chose to do next would determine the family's future. Would he disown Thomas, cling to the pain, and burn the bridges behind him? Or would he find a way to reconcile truth with love? And what about Eric? The man who had built an empire now faced the guilt of tearing his own son apart. One secret, one misstep, one night decades ago. Now generations are paying the price. And the bold and the beautiful is no longer just about love and fashion. It's about blood, betrayal, and the brutal cost of truth. Finn couldn't sleep. Ever since discovering the shocking genetic mismatch between Ridge and Thomas, a detail in the medical files gnawed at his mind like a loose thread in a tightly woven tapestry. Something about the paternity test results from years ago didn't sit right. Finn, methodical by nature, had retraced the data several times. Then, late one night in the lab, he noticed something small but critical. The barcode sticker on Thomas's original sample report had microscopic tearing along the edge. It looked like it had been peeled and reapplied. A switch. A deliberate one. Someone had tampered with the test. And it wasn't just sloppily done, it was covered up with expert precision. Finn didn't confront anyone immediately. He knew how volatile the Forrester family had become since the revelation. Instead, he quietly accessed the archived logs from the night Thomas was born. He wanted to know every person who was present during that delivery, during those chaotic first hours when paperwork moved fast and unnoticed. After cross-referencing nurse assignments and shift rotations from the night in question, one name jumped out at him: Amelia Roberts. She wasn't just a floor nurse. She had been called in late that night to cover a sudden shortage. Her record was spotless, except for one note buried deep in the internal 5 years earlier. She had been the personal recovery nurse for Stephanie Forrester during her hip replacement surgery. A private duty nurse, trusted, discreet, and fiercely loyal. Finn dug further and found nothing overtly criminal. But the dots were starting to connect. A nurse loyal to the late matriarch Stephanie. A chaotic emergency birth. A tampered test result. A family legacy too powerful to be tainted by scandal. At the same time, Taylor was experiencing a spiral of her own. Since the discovery that Eric was Thomas's biological father, not Ridge, her memories from decades ago had started resurfacing with painful clarity. She hadn't wanted to remember. She hadn't wanted to question it. But now, pushed by the truth, she forced herself to revisit those fragile, forgotten moments. One stood out above the rest. She had been alone in the hospital, exhausted, post-labor, when Eric Forrester showed up unexpectedly with a set of documents. He was calm, persuasive. He told her Ridge had been overwhelmed and confused, but that everything would work out better this way. For the good of the family, he had said. For the stability of the Forrester name, the documents weren't paternity-related meant directly. They were vague. A hospital authorization form. A family medical directive. A legal-looking release. Taylor hadn't even read them carefully. She was drugged, sleep-deprived, recovering from delivery and emotional trauma. She signed. Eric said it was just standard paperwork to ensure that Ridge could sign the birth certificate and that the family image remained untarnished. At the time, it seemed harmless. Now, she knew better. One night, unable to suppress the weight of it all, Taylor drove to the Forrester estate. It was late. The house was quiet. She stood at the door for a long time before knocking. Eric answered, surprised, wearing his robe. He invited her in, not yet sensing the gravity of the moment. Taylor didn't waste time. "I need the truth," she said, her voice flat. "All of it." Eric didn't flinch. "About what? About Thomas. About what you did. About what you made me do." Eric sighed and walked to the fireplace, where he poured himself a glass of brandy. "I protected this family. That's all I've ever done." Taylor stepped forward. "You manipulated me. You made me sign something I didn't understand. You let Ridge believe Thomas was his son. You let me believe it. I didn't let you believe anything," Eric said, now sharper. "You wanted to believe it. You needed to. And so did Ridge. The truth would have torn us apart. The company. The family. Everything Stephanie and I built." Taylor stared at him in horror. "So it's true. You knew all along." Eric didn't deny it. He turned to face her, his expression weary. "Yes, I knew. I suspected from the beginning. I had the results confirmed quietly. But I buried it. For Ridge. For the company. For you. And for Thomas." Taylor's face twisted in disbelief. "For Thomas. You stole his identity. You stole his father." Eric's tone hardened. "I gave him a name that mattered. A legacy. Without it, he would have been a liability scandal born from a one-night mistake. This family survives because we manage the truth, not expose it." Taylor stepped back, her voice rising. "You sound just like Stephanie. Do you even hear yourself? You're talking about lives, not brand management." Eric drained his glass and walked to the piano, avoiding her gaze. "You think the truth would have helped him? Do you really? Ridge would have disowned you. The press would have destroyed you. And Thomas would have grown up without a father, branded illegitimate, a stain on the Forrester name." She was trembling now. "So you decided for all of us. You built a life out of lies." Eric met her eyes, and for the first time, he looked old. "Tired." "Yes," he said. "And I'd do it again." Taylor was silent for a long time. Then she whispered, "This will destroy Forrester Creations." Eric nodded slowly. "Maybe. Or maybe it will finally set it free." The next day, Taylor went to Steffi. She told her everything about the signature, the cover-up, Eric's confession. Steffi was devastated. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" she asked, voice shaking. Taylor simply said, "Because I didn't remember. And when I did, I couldn't accept it." Rich found out later that night. He didn't speak. He just left the room, the house, the city. No one knew where he went. The Forrester Creations board met the following week, forced to confront the possibility that their leadership tree was rooted in deception. Lawyers stepped in. Shareholders threatened lawsuits. The media began circling. The Forrester empire stood on the edge of collapse. Meanwhile, Thomas, still undergoing treatment, learned the full extent of the cover-up. He didn't explode. He didn't cry. He simply said, "I don't know who I am anymore." Finn remained by his side. "I don't know what your name means," he said, "but I know who you are. And that's the only thing that matters if you want to live." Thomas nodded faintly. "Then let's finish this. I want to live." And just like that, the truth wasn't the end. It was the beginning of everything the Forresters had avoided for decades. And it was far from over.